So now we come to the agenda, and item 1 is apologies for absence. So do we have any apologies?
Yep, we've got apologies from councillors Rutland and Moreland.
Thank you. And now we come to item 2, which is disclosure of interests, to deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosable pecuniary interests and interests other than pecuniary interests, as defined under the Seaford Town Council Code of Conduct and Localism Act 2011 in relation to matters on the agenda. So are there any disclosures of interest? Councillor Walraven has a hand raised.
Thank you, Chair. Agenda item 5, I'm Vice President of the Seaford Lifeguards.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Borman.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a non-pecuniary interest in item 10 as their personal friends, so I won't be taking part in that item and will leave the meeting for that agenda item.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Meek, are you scratching your nose or indicating you have an interest? Right, does anybody have an interest to disclose? Councillor Everton.
Yeah, so I have an interest in agenda item 12 and I'll be leaving the meeting when that's discussed.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else? No, I think that's everyone. Okay, so we come to item 3, which is public participation. This is to deal with any questions or brief representations from members of the public in accordance with the Seaford Town Council policy and local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus flexibility of local authority and police crime panels meeting England and Wales regulations 2020. So does anyone from the public gallery want to indicate they wish to speak at this point? Now, as the meeting began, I saw someone was here from the rugby club. And Isabel.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes.
So I can't.
Yeah.
I'm trying to work it where you are. This is on my screen. I can't work it. There you are. Okay, good. I'm glad. You're exactly the place where I can't see you. So thank you. Right, thank you. So over to you. And now, if you say which agenda item you wish to speak about, and then let us know what your representations are.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Warren. I'm one of the directors and the treasurer of Seaford Rugby Club. And thank you very much for this opportunity to explain a little bit about what the agenda item, I think it's 5,
yes,
is on your agenda for this evening. We have been looking for the last 6 or 7 years at making some very serious and far-reaching improvements to our clubhouse facilities, changing rooms, ref rooms, to accommodate not only the changing environment that we have with the youth environment working with sports clubs today, but also looking to the future in terms of protecting where the club will be in the next number of years going forward. We did look in 2012 at making some substantial improvements to the clubhouse using the RFU and Sport England facilities at the time via their grant facilities. Unfortunately, we didn't progress beyond then because when we looked at the costings, we just didn't have sufficient money available to do that. In 2016, we were incredibly unfortunate, or unfortunate, I should say, to be able to be receipt of an enormous legacy from one of our ex-members. And that completely revigorated our appraisal to the opportunity for improvement to our clubhouse facilities. And so we started to take advice from the RFU, which is the Rugby Football Union in the UK, or in England, I should say, and from Sport England as to what we should be doing first. And very clearly, the most important thing was to look at our lease, which at that moment in time only had 16 years remaining. And for the amount of investment that we were looking to try and put into the clubhouse, which in total at that time was around about £750,000 to really completely renovate the clubhouse, it was deemed that we really need to be looking at a long lease to be able to get the match funding required from RFU and Sport England purposes. And it's for that reason that we applied to have a new lease with the Seaford Rugby Club to extend our current lease to a period beyond 50 years, which is the recommended lease line that we were told by our advisors that would gain us the best chance to be able to get match funding through Sport England and from the RFU. And in principle, that's what today's agenda item is all about, as we had a lease prepared and now the opportunity has come to finalise that lease for a period over 50 years. So it's all to do with the renovation and improvement of our clubhouse and facilities for the longevity of the sport in Seaford going forward. There is a more detailed report in your packs, and I hope this is just a bit of a précis for you, get an indication of what that's about. And I hope that's sufficient for your purposes tonight.
Okay, thank you, Paul. That's been useful in terms of summary and background, so thank you for that. And we shall be at that agenda item within a couple of agenda items as we move forward. So thank you. I think that, Paul, you're the only member in the public gallery. So let's move on to the minutes. So we're into item 4. To note the following minutes, approving and not approving recommendations is required. So the full council meeting on the 15th of October, someone proposed that. Yes, Councillor Dunn, Councillor Borman, those in favour, please show. Golf and the View, Councillor Brown proposes that. Someone seconds that. Councillor Cash, those in favour, please show. Uh, 4.3 personnel. Let's see, someone proposed this. Councillor Edson, followed by seconded Councillor Honeyman. Those in favour. Okay, now we're going to 4.4. There's 3 sets of minutes of the planning and highways. Councillor Walraven, you want to propose those? Councillor Walraven proposes. Councillor Evidence seconds. All those in favour? That's everyone. That's carried. Okay, thank you. We now move to item 5, the Seaford Rugby Club lease. So we're now on, get the right page in my papers. We're now on page 4. And Tony Jackson, have you anything to say in the lead into this?
Thank you, Chair. Not really. I mean, it's all in the report, but I've been down the club a few times, and I've met a few times with Paul. And it is a fantastic facility, and it would be really good for the council to get behind it and grant this lease, which will just give the club that much more scope to improve things and go forward. Okay, thank you. Can I just say, for all of the agenda items tonight, what I propose to do is to have some discussion before we put a proposal to the vote. So opening for discussion now, Councillor Brown. You're muted.
Right, can you hear me now?
I can now, yes.
Right, I'm looking at item 110, and I'd like to know that Seaford Rugby Club agree a sublease with Seaford Lifeguards. It's quite important that they continue to use that building.
I understand that they do, but Tony Jackson, could you comment on that?
Yes, they do. It's an informal agreement, but we would, through this lease, like to formalise it. So, there'll be more protection for the lifeguards, basically, after we get this lease agreed.
Okay. Thank you. Anyone else? This is about discussion about any Councillor Ali Hyder.
I'd just like to know, say annual club was increased to £1,000 rent, 500 to £1,000. For how long this rent been increased? And if we do 50 years lease, is there any rent increase or review after 3 years, 5 years, anything like that?
Tony Jackson.
Yes, this will be looked at yearly, and we would expect it to go up with inflation or RPI.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? No, I think that's no further questions. I'll simply read the recommendations now. The council is recommended to consider approving a 50-year lease with the Seaford Rugby Club to consider approving an agreement within the lease to allow Seaford lifeguards to continue to have the use of the first floor of the Seaford Rugby Clubhouse, and to delegate to the projects and facilities manager, in consultation with the proper officer, the power to agree terms of the lease with all councillors electronically before finalising, where consensus is achieved. If consensus cannot be achieved, this will be brought back to full council. So 3 recommendations. Councillor Cash.
I was saying, can we take them together?
I think if you're proposing that, we can,
Yep.
yes. Councillor Brown, taking them together. So we have proposed and second, we take these 3 recommendations together. So if we can do it clearly, please show your, we'll have to do it with a show of hands, otherwise we'll go for a roll call. So those in favour, yes, I think that's everyone voting and everyone voting in favour. So there, thank you. So there are no objections because everyone's voted. No abstentions. This is carried. Thank you. Now we go to item 6, and we're on page 9, and about page 8 and 9. So again, the opportunity to talk about this before we come to proposal on it, but basically we are asked to note the contents of the report, and the report is the position statement is actually virtually in effect. So before we come to vote on this, anyone want to discuss this? Councillor Borman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say thank you to all the officers for all their input into this report, because it's ever changing, the situation, and they work so hard to keep it updated for the town. So just thank you to all the officers involved in this.
Yes, thank you. I think that's worth restating on the basis every time it got written, it had to change because something else changed. So they've done well to kind of keep up with the ever-changing government guidance. So anyone else have a comment? Councillor Richard Honeyman.
Thank you very much for that. Of course, there are financial implications, but we obviously can't discuss them here. That's discussed further on the exempt part, isn't it?
Yes. Yes, that will be about the COVID situation generally. So any other comments? Someone like to propose that the recommendation is to note the contents of the report. Councillor Borman has a hand up. Yeah, you're proposing this. Someone seconding it. Councillor Everton. Okay, all those in favour. If you could raise a hand so I can clearly see it. Okay, that's everyone voting in favour, so that's unanimous. So that's item 7. And then we come to item 7, which is the review of publication agendas and minutes. We're now on page 11 for those who are papers in front of them. Again, before we come to take a proposal on these recommendations, does anyone have comments to make? Councillor Richard Honeyman, Councillor Dunn.
So, sorry, just going back to that previous, is there a typo at the bottom of page 10? Because it's saying trying to prevent a second wave of the virus. We already are in the second wave of the virus, so I can't understand that context. So I've written wrong, the tenses.
Sorry?
Bottom of page 10, it talks about trying to prevent a second wave of the virus. Well, we're already in one, aren't we?
Sorry, just if I can, through you, Chair.
Yes.
I mean, we're in the second lockdown, but my understanding was that was to prevent a second wave. So we're not at the second wave just yet, and we're hoping not to be.
Well, the Prime Minister said we're in the second wave of September, if you remember. So. Right.
I think we've already agreed. We've already accepted the report. So,
but it's incorrect, obviously. So
I think we made. I think before when it gets reposted to the website, perhaps that could be amended slightly. But I think it was the intention is to curb a second wave or to reduce the effectiveness or the impact of a second wave. We can find some words that will expect the meaning without changing the report too much.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, back to agenda item 7, and the review of publication of agendas and minutes. Again, before we put a proposal to the meeting, does anyone have a comment to make, something to discuss? Councillor Dunn, Councillor Borman. Brian.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. 1.7, the key changes is regarding sort of disciplinary grievance subcommittee, and there is details of that further on in the report. Just as clarification, to remove them immediately after the meeting day, is it purely on the basis of protection of identity or too much personal information that could be still on our website? Because the report doesn't really make it clear why we're going to be removing these particular minutes. And
Isabel? Isabel, would you like to explain that?
If I could pass that to Georgia, because this is Georgia's one.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, of course. So really, yes, that is the reason why this is being looked at. I think it doesn't feel right or reasonable that we have these sorts of documents publicised on our website. Obviously, transparency requirements are that we do publicise these documents, but it doesn't say the exact ways in which you have to do it. So I think with documents like this, it's just much more appropriate that we keep them internally, but people can request copies if needed.
I think it's transparency and confidentiality competing with each other, but we do what's legally required of us. Councillor Borman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just want to put a query on 2.8. Obviously, with grievances and disciplinaries, there's time limits on when you have to deal with them. With going to a full council or a personnel committee, obviously, then you have to have an extraordinary one to form a group to do that. So would it then be a possibility that you're working over the time limits of when having to deal with a disciplinary or grievance?
I think it's fair to make the point that 2.8 and 2.9 are proposals of what could happen, rather than what will happen. But Georgia.
Yeah, sorry, Chair. So I think what we would probably recommend there is that we would arrange the extraordinary full council committee meeting, and then you can pre-arrange a meeting for immediately afterwards for the group. So while you won't know who the members are when you arrange the meeting, you know, all councillors would be aware of it, and then that meeting can take place straight away afterwards, and it just prevents that delay, like you say.
Okay. Councillor Brown.
Yes, I've got a reservation about item 2.9. I agree that it's a proposition, but it seems to me that there's a possibility that councillors that are on personnel could also get on grievance and discipline, and that would be a conflict of interest in that case. You have to be very careful how you selected that working party if this thing comes to fruition.
I think it's fair to say this is a section headed research rather than actually a proposal section, but I think we take the point. Councillor Dunn.
Yeah, sorry. Referring back to 2.8 regarding changing this, or 2.8 and 2.9 sort of respectively, I understand it in line with what Councillor Brown has said, is that if we go down the personal route to deal with this, in line with the research the officers have carried out regarding other councils, that we would actually dispel grievance and disciplinary, and we would put it completely under personnel. And the reason being, more than not, is that as soon as you put something in a disciplinary, horrible thoughts go around people's minds. What has the person done? What they've been up to? And it sort of conjures up sort of a very, the word in itself conjures up negativity. So if Georgia or Isabel could clarify, that is what that requires. If it goes under the personnel, we will actually dispel grievance and disciplinary. Is that correct?
But I think the point to make again is it's still a big if. It's not saying we intend, or if and we might. I think it's at the level of it. Yeah, Georgia, Isabel, you want to respond?
Yeah, if I may, Chair. So yeah, you're completely right there, Councillor Dunn. the other town councils that we've looked at, it is that they don't have a specific disciplinary or grievance subcommittee, that it is members of the personnel committee that then deal with that issue. So like you say, that was one of the main things, is to try and avoid kind of disciplinary or grievance being the buzzword that everyone's seeing, because they do just come with negative associations. But I think obviously what we do is, when we do look to implement this change or bring a report regarding this change, we'll set all of that out in detail so the council completely understand the process and structure.
Okay, thank you. Just everyone can you just make sure everyone's microphones are muted unless you're talking. There's a bit of background noise from somewhere. It's been brought to my attention, if we go to page 14, where it talks about agendas, and you come down to 1, 2, 3, 4, paragraph 5 or 5 and 6 of that item 1 agendas, which is page 14, that when we finalise the town clerk's job description, we said that agendas would be agreed in discussion with the chair of the relevant meeting, and clearly we need to decide how we can bring what's here in this agenda section into line with that. And does anyone want to speak to that? Because the 1 or 2 people raise this as, like, Councillor Brown.
Yes, Chair, thank you very much. I think we ought to put a time limit on this, because otherwise it could seriously affect the timescale of getting the agenda out into the community. Apart from that, I'm thoroughly in accord with what's written there, that it should be discussed with the chair of each committee or the council in advance of the agenda going out.
Okay, Councillor Dunn.
Yep, I completely support so an amendment to this policy at paragraph 5, but I would also like to add paragraph 4. I'd like a slight amendment, because it says the agenda will aim to be published at least 1 week before the meeting is held, but maybe a short notice of 3 working days. Could we not change that to not less, but maybe not less than 3 clear working days? The reason is that is in bold in our standing orders, because it's legislation. It's actually contained within the Local Government Act 1972, that you can't publish the minutes less than 3 clear working days, and that's very specific, rather than just 3 clear working days. So would that be possible? I don't know if we with your amendment and mine, whether we need a seconder. I don't know.
So probably Georgia for this. Councillor Dunn's point, is this something that's easily acceptable?
Yes, I think, sorry Chair, through you, I think it's just a simple change to taking out as short notice as, and saying may not be less than. So yeah, simple change. I can make a note of that and make that.
Okay, thank you.
Georgia.
And yeah. I think there's somebody with some background noise. Just to say, we've thought about this issue about what's in the town clerk's job description and what's here in the agenda item, and there's a suggestion about how we could handle this to make it easy. Rather than me read it to you, I think the easy thing is if you can have a look at it. And Georgia, could you put this into the chat, please, so we can see what would cover this? And someone isn't muted, whoever it is. That's better.
Hello, everybody.
Hello. Georgia, if you could put that resolution into the chat box.
Sorry, Chair, can I just clarify, is that the resolution that you emailed, or the slight amendments that I suggested?
The final version we agreed between us.
Okay, lovely. Sorry, I just didn't want to put the wrong...
Yeah, sorry, no, I wasn't being very clear at that point.
Right. There we go, that's in the chat.
So can everybody see this item in the chat box now? So prior to the agenda being published of an ordinary council or committee meeting, the proper officer will make arrangements for the chair of the meeting to review the agenda and associated reports. Where extraordinary meetings are concerned, the chair of that meeting will be asked to not only review the agenda and reports, but also approve and sign the agenda. Obviously, there are differences between ordinary meetings and extraordinary meetings, and between what the chair can do and the town clerk can do. So has everybody got a chance to read that and understand it? Everybody reading it? So I think we can reverse through this. So there's, I think from the chair, I'll propose that resolution, I'll propose what you've just seen in that chat box. Someone like to second that? Councillor Dunn. Does anyone? Right, so we're ready to move to a vote on that now. So those in favour, please show. I think that's everyone in favour. I think everyone voting, everyone in favour. That's carried. So we've already agreed that the small text change from Councillor Dunn is acceptable without the need to vote. So we come back to the recommendations now. Are we ready to put these two recommendations to the vote? Anyone have anything else they want to say before we do that? Councillor Brown?
We should be looking at the publication scheme as well.
Is this one and, you mean 1 and 2, or?
It's on page 16, 17 onwards. It's all part of the same activity.
Yes, yeah. So that is, if we go to vote on the recommendations to adopt the revised agendas and minutes policy as presented, and to adopt the revised publication scheme. So Councillor Brown, you're saying we need to spend some time discussing pages 16, 17 and 18?
Yes, I do. I noticed that on class 5, a lot of the policies and procedures have been struck through as not being published, and I wonder why we were doing that.
That's a question to, I think, Georgia.
Yes, Chair. So simply that's that I'm not quite sure why, but for some reason there was just certain policies picked to be included individually within the publication scheme, but actually the Town Council has a lot more policies than was shown on the previous version. So what we're recommending there is just to keep kind of the overall category of each of the policies, but all policies are publicised as they always have been on the council's website. It was just that if we listed out every individual policy, I think we've got about 40 policies, so the publication scheme would be horribly long.
So to explain that then, the row that's not crossed through, in essence, covers everything else. So policies and procedures, the conduct of the Town Council business, hard copy and website, actually covers everything already. It covers all 40 rather than these 8 or 10. So they'll all be there. We just decided to say they'll all be there rather than listing which ones will be there. So Councillor Brown, does that explain it?
Yes, that's fine. I was a bit worried that we weren't going to publish them, and then we'll get members of the public coming in and saying, well, why aren't you publishing them? But that's fine. Thank you, George.
It would be possible to read this to see if there's something going to disappear from the website, but that's clearly not the case. Anyone else? No, I think nobody's signalling to speak. So we go back to page 11 and to the two recommendations. The full council is recommended to adopt the revised agendas and minutes policy. That's now with that amendment already included, and to adopt the revised publication scheme as presented. Someone would propose we take these together? Councillor Brown, Councillor Borman. Okay, so the vote then is to adopt these two recommendations as one piece. So those in favour, please. That seems to be everybody. So thank you. That's unanimous. So we're now moving on to item 8. So I now move that in accordance with the Public Bodies Admission to Meetings Act 1960, the press and the public be excluded for the remainder of the meeting, as the following items on the agenda concern confidential details about contracts, Town Council assets and employment details. Someone second that? Councillor Borman, those in favour? That's everyone. So Paul, thank you for joining us, and we shall probably meet in the town at some point.